Hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. Today we're zeroing in on a director whose movies literally make us feel a very specific, almost inescapable sense of unease. I'm talking, of course, about David Fincher. Think about it. Whether you're watching a bone-tired detective track a serial killer or a college student coding a global social network in his dorm room, you're probably sitting there feeling incredibly tense. And as we're going to see today, that tension, it is by absolute meticulous design. Okay, let's dive right into this with what is basically Fincher's core philosophy. Nothing here is accidental. Seriously, the tension you feel in a Fincher film isn't just magically appearing from the plots or the actors' performances. No, it comes directly from his extreme, totally clinical control over every single frame. He doesn't just cross his fingers and hope for some spontaneous on-set magic. He relies on rigorous, calculated engineering. Which brings us right to the specific term we are exploring today, Fincheresque. We're talking about a highly polished, incredibly exacting visual and editorial approach. You know the traits when you see them, that fluid yet robotic camera movement, those famously desaturated green and yellow color palettes, and storylines that are just deeply, deeply preoccupied with dark procedural details. So, keep this in the back of your mind. A Fincher film isn't just a standard dark thriller. It's literally engineered like a precise piece of heavy machinery. Here's our roadmap for the explainer today. We're going to define the Fincheresque style, explore his illusion of perfect control, and examine that machine-like camera. Then we'll dive into the sickly colors, look at process as pure suspense, and wrap up with his focus on warped visionaries. Honestly, our own forensic deconstruction of his style here perfectly mirrors Fincher's own procedural obsession. Let's get into it. Section 1. Defining the Fincheresque style. Now, to truly understand what Fincher is doing, we actually have to look at what he actively avoids. It's fascinating. He completely embraces fluid yet robotic camera moves, clinical digital perfection, a really tight rhythm, and motivated practical lighting. On the flip side, he strictly avoids handheld chaos, sloppy spontaneity, indulgent pacing, and that pretty, glowing, overly cinematic light. This disciplined avoidance of messy, spontaneous filmmaking is exactly why human unpredictability feels so terrifying in his movies. When the world looks this perfectly controlled, any human error suddenly feels like a massive threat. Now, what's really interesting about this is how that control trickles down through the entire production. Fincheresque is definitely not just slapping a moody color filter on the lens and calling it a day. It is a rigorous set of rules executed across every single department. In cinematography, he demands stable grammar and precise framing. Period. Lighting. That requires restrained highlights and heavy, substantial blacks. Editing must have this tight, ticking clock rhythm with zero wasted beats. And the production design has to feature procedural detail and entirely believable systems. If there's even a hint of sloppiness, it just kills the whole effect. Section 2. The illusion of perfect control. So let's look at Fincher's background to uncover where exactly this obsessive need for creative control came from. It's quite a journey. First, during his early days doing frame-by-frame animation at Industrial Light and Magic, he learned extreme precision. He realized that every 14 frames had to solve a very specific problem. From there, he moved into directing music videos, experimenting with huge budgets and avant-garde styles for pop stars, which really helped him find his distinct visual voice. But the real turning point? That was directing Alien 3 at just 27 years old. He clashed violently with studio executives over constant rewrites and literally having to start production without a finished script. Fincher famously called the Alien 3 experience a baptism by fire. And man, this nightmare production taught him his ultimate lesson. It formed his absolute resolve to never, ever make a movie without complete creative control again. He realized that if you aren't prepared to just walk away from a project, you essentially have zero power. So this disastrous early clash is exactly what birthed his signature need for absolute authority over his sets. Section 3. The machine-like camera. Okay, there's this fascinating anecdote from his film Zodiac that just perfectly captures this authority. To film a completely normal Vallejo neighborhood from a moving car window, Fincher didn't just stick a cameraman in the passenger seat, no way. Because he completely refuses to use shaky cam, he demanded his crew lay down 40 feet of dolly track alongside the road, just so the camera could glide with perfect smoothness. He demands a detached, indifferent, mechanically smooth view of the world, even for something as incredibly mundane as a neighborhood barbecue. And this brilliantly illustrates a core Fincher camera technique, the withheld decompression shot. Here's how it works. First, he starts with intense,
totally claustrophobic facial close-ups, right in the middle of a dialogue scene. Then, he builds immense psychological tension by intentionally delaying the wide shot. He completely withholds spatial awareness from the viewer, so we literally don't even know the layout of the room. Finally, we get the visual exhale, the decompression, into a medium establishing shot. By trapping us in tight close-ups, he creates this massive subconscious tension before finally letting us breathe.
Section 4. Sickly colors and dark worlds.
So we're shifting from how the camera moves to how the world actually looks. People often mistakenly think Fincheresque just means, dark and green. But these desaturated green and dirty yellow palettes are highly intentional. They represent fluorescent interiors, bureaucracy, and decay. They literally signal moral contamination and psychological nausea to our brains. The colors aren't just there to look moody for the sake of it. They're actively used to make the environments feel institutional, sick, and just fundamentally corrupted.
Fincher literally uses these environments as active characters to control the mood. Just take Seven, for example. The city is drowning in relentless rain, and Detective Mill's apartment physically shakes violently from passing trains. It's brilliant because it traps the characters in a claustrophobic reminder that they are dealing with pure evil. Contrast that with the library, the only peaceful, non-violent, well-lit location in the entire film. The environment entirely dictates the psychological safety of the scene. Section 5. Process as pure suspense. Let's move from the visual to the narrative and see how mundane procedures become absolute terror. Consider John Doe's workflow of evil in Seven. He brutally cuts off his own fingertips so he leaves no prints. He force-feeds the gluttony victim to death. He extracts exactly a pound of flesh for greed. And get this, he visits the sloth victim every single day for a year just to care for his bed sores so the victim won't die prematurely. What makes John Doe truly terrifying isn't just the gruesome violence, it's his meticulous patience, it's his horrific workflow. And incredibly, we never actually see him kill anyone on screen. Our own imagination fills in the worst possible details of his process. And it all feeds into an overarching architectural design. In Seven, everything follows a chilling pattern of 7. 7 days of the week, 7 deadly sins. Detective Somerset is retiring in exactly 7 days. And that pivotal, devastating final delivery, it arrives at exactly 7:01 p.m. The real suspense comes from realizing the characters are trapped inside a perfectly engineered system that they simply cannot escape. Section 6. Obsession and warped visionaries. Let's pull back and see how this builds, because we can actually connect John Doe's obsessive control to protagonists throughout Fincher's entire filmography. Whether it's a serial killer like John Doe or a tech billionaire like Mark Zuckerberg in The Social Network, Fincher just loves to explore fractured male loners. These characters cast themselves as part of a grand design with a quasi-sociopathic worldview. They aren't just ambitious, they share a deeply destructive obsession with systems. They all believe they know exactly how the world should work, and they will rigorously and ruthlessly engineer their surroundings to fit that warped vision. Which brings us to a final, pretty heavy question. Does Fincher's detached, voyeuristic lens make us, the audience, complicit in the dark, procedural obsession we are watching? Think about it. Fincher sets up the perfectly smooth camera. He gives us the exact clinical details. He draws us right into the systematic minds of killers and corrupted visionaries. And we just sit back, completely fascinated by these meticulously engineered worlds. So I leave you with this to ponder. Does our fascination make us willing participants in all that darkness? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. And honestly, I hope you never look at a perfectly smooth camera pan the exact same way again.